Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, 25 years serial tech entrepreneur. My book, Fail Hard, Win Big, is my story of 30 ventures, 20 failures with 10 wins, with the common element between all of them being software development. I'm also CEO of Sonatify Technology. Today, we have Don Allen out of Las Vegas, Nevada on the show. Don has a great background. He's worked with private equity companies in multiple industries, CIO, CSO, CTO, COO. I can't even say them all. Don, welcome. Happy to have you.
Happy to be here.
Don, you've held a lot of different roles from a tech leadership and operational leadership. If you would, please give our audience a snapshot of your career journey so far and what excites you the most.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for that. I've had a career of, I'll say, happy accidents. I think, of course, what do they always say? Luck follows the hardest worker, I guess, but not saying I'm the hardest worker, but perhaps I'm the luckiest. I've been very fortunate in my career to have had the opportunity to be exposed to a lot of different technologies and at a lot of different companies. Also progressed through the data center space, from building our own data center when I was at Costco through managed colo at drugstore.com at the beginning, and then eventually getting to a pure cloud environment where I am now. And I've just been involved in that entire progression as it goes, and I've seen the opportunities, strengths, and weaknesses of each. And the same thing's true for the industries. I've been a DBA, I've been a network engineer, I've been a security engineer, and I had an opportunity to move through those because they were areas of need. And I just wanted to, I consider myself a technologist. And I don't want to pigeonhole myself in any certain technology. I'm at home on a Mac or a Windows machine or reconfiguring a Linux kernel. It doesn't bother me because I've always wanted to be exposed to all the different sides of technology. And that has enabled me to get, lucky in life and in my career as I've gone through, because I've been able to be adaptive in some of those situations. And particularly when I was
I'm a big believer, Don. Luck happens when preparation and opportunity meet. We got to make our own luck. You work hard and you're persistent and you create your own luck.
Yeah, the only thing, the funny thing is, though, I was talking to someone the other day, and I've interviewed so many people, and I was talking about they're asking me about advice, how to interview, and all my advice for how to interview was how to, from the interviewer standpoint. And they were saying, "What about you? What do you do in an interview?" And I say, "Well, I haven't sat for an interview in 10 years, and then before that, probably for 15. My job's progression has always been just moving and through professional contacts and people that I'd worked with in the past. That again is treating people right and having an opportunity to move and make good connections. And it reminds me of something I would always tell my kids: be nice to everyone, because you never know who you're going to work for. They may work for you today, but you may work for them tomorrow.
And last time I checked, the CIOs, CTOs looking for jobs, you don't get one by applying on LinkedIn. You get one by utilizing your network, getting referrals. So I couldn't agree with you more. Now, you're currently the CIO and CISO of Moda Operandi. Tell our listeners about the company.
Moda Operandi is a high fashion multi-brand retailer. And what that essentially means is we sell other people's things. We make a few things ourselves in the home goods category. It's founded by Lauren San Domingo, who's an editor at Vogue, very very famous New York fashion icon. And it's been around for about 15 years now. And it's gone through various stages of being operationally sound and trying different things and extending too far in some cases and not far enough in others. But we're on really good footing now, and we've been doing really well. And what we really bring is we bring a place online where you can buy from several of these high fashion brands that are hard to get and not everyone can carry, but you can do it in one place. And you can also get guidance. Lauren's Closet, for example, is one of the big draws. And I live in a neighborhood here in Las Vegas. Of course, I work in New York, and I'm in New York every month for at least a week at the Moda Operandi offices. And then I meet people here in Las Vegas that are like, "Oh, I just love Lauren's Closet." And Lauren's Closet is the curated view that Lauren puts out for the products that she chooses, for at any given time in any fashion season. So pretty big, I'll say cult following, but also fairly successful from just general e-commerce following, and have really been working hard to figure out how to differentiate yourself in this really tough economy, in this really tough fashion market.
Well, and reading right from Moda Operandi's LinkedIn page, having raised over 300 million in funding for this e-commerce platform. So you guys are probably doing some cool things.
We've done quite a bit. We have actually have a bespoke platform. So we've written to this point everything ourselves, and part of the and that's good in some cases, and it's also has a negative connotation, because really right now, I mean, the entire industry is just circled around the AI initiative and where it's going, and how AI is going to be feed into all businesses. And with the coalescence around AI right now, the question is, what do we do? Do we continue to build our own systems and infrastructure and build our own AI systems? Because I think the last 3 or 4 years have clearly shown that the people that are really advancing AI are large companies that are focused on mostly it has been generative AI, and now we talk a lot about agentic AI as it's really taking root. But agentic is, of course, dependent on generative AI in some degree, and the companies that are in the back of that, really the people, even the people that are building good agentic AI systems, are still leveraging the generative AI systems that are out there, and those are run by, when you're talking about Google and OpenAI, and you're not talking about me with a small team of 5 people spinning up my own solutions. So we've kind of come to the realization that we want to buy for commodity and build for competitive advantage, which is an old saying, right? It's nothing transformative about that. But when I say buy for commodity, I don't just mean commodity things like email and file share. I mean buy commodity things that have AI adaptability and plug-in. Moving our platform, perhaps moving our platform to Shopify. We looked at Shopify, we looked at Salesforce, we looked at systems that have established e-commerce systems where they're already building. They have 1,000 engineers building plugins for different AI systems. So why should I try to compete with that? What I should do is leverage it. And where I compete is the points of differentiation, specialized landing pages, headless aspects that do things that other sites don't do, that we can build.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Don, like you said, your entire platform's custom built, right?
It is today.
Okay. So that, and of e-commerce giants, and there are so many big ones out there, that's interesting, and that you guys have done that, and I think opened you up to a lot more differentiation than, white labeling a Shopify platform.
It has. That's the trick, right? The trick is where can you use those platforms so you can get things like plugins and interactions. As we've onboarded some things, like we onboarded Miracle as a marketplace integration platform just about 2 years ago. We did it in our custom platform. It took us a lot longer than it would have taken us if we had been on a standard platform, probably twice as long. So the question is, where can you use these standard platforms to create these fast integration points and these AI capabilities that are in these plugin applications that are coming out, but still maintain your identity, the uniqueness of your identity? Because we don't want to look like every other, like if we go with Shopify, for example, we don't want to look like every other Shopify site. But we also don't want to have all of the challenges that we have when you're on a purely bespoke platform. Where's the balance? And that's what we're striving right now to find as we look at some of these solutions.
How did you land as CIO and CISO for the company?
Well, what happened at Moda Operandi is I had gone with a summit into one of the summit portfolio companies that wound up going public. And after that departure, I was doing private consulting, and I was doing a job for Moda Operandi. I was moving them into a brand new fulfillment center, and I had spent a lot of time in technology fulfillment at other companies, and I was at least selling myself as a fulfillment expert, and I was out there doing fulfillment integration projects. And Ryder Technologies, or at the time was PLG, which was later acquired by Ryder, they had me freelancing these projects. They were sending me to move people into their fulfillment centers. Okay. And Moda was moving into one of theirs. So I got involved with Moda. I was helping them move into the fulfillment center. And then Jim Gold came on as the new CEO at Moda Operandi. And he started to talk to me about he asked me if I would also take a look at the technology strategy and the people and do a little assessment for him. And I did. And after working with him for a little bit and doing that assessment, he had talked to some people that knew me from Summit Partners, and he asked me if I would come on board and take the CIO job. And I did. That was about 5 years ago. And after being there for about a year, I realized working with legal, a fantastic head legal attorney that we have, we just realized that there wasn't anyone in the CISO position. We're signing all these attestations. We're doing all the security work. I had a background in security, of course, as a security engineer. So I then took on the CISO title out of necessity so that I could just start to interact with other CISOs. And our answer didn't want to be, well, we don't have a CISO. It wanted to be, well,
Sure.
I'm the CIO and the CISO.
Now, working with private equity companies where you're exposed to a lot of different businesses as a tech leader and executive, what are the pros and cons to that?
Oh, the pros and cons. The pro is the con. And I'll tell you what I mean. The pro to working with private equity. I've worked with a few private equity companies in my rounds, and I'm not four, but I've worked with Vista, I've worked with KKR, and of course I worked for Summit. And we partner with some of those other firms we went. One of the things that I've learned about private equity, particularly those guys, and perhaps even more so Summit Partners, everyone's smart. Like you go into a company, we're used to working in companies where there's smart people, and then there's people that are that are hardworking, but maybe they're not the most, intelligent. I'm not trying to insult anyone, but, it's a normal distribution of people. But private equity is not a normal distribution of humans. It is a cultivated group of humans because they bring people in and if they don't cut it, they're in and out the door, right? So they're cycling through the best of the best and they're keeping the ones they want. So the good thing about private equity and the good thing about working with Summit was everyone was talented. And the bad thing about working there was everyone was talented. So you never had, like, everyone was a go-getter, and it was always on, it was very fulfilling work, but it was, make no mistake about it. In a company like that, it's always on. You got to be sharp. You're not going to have a meeting with someone in the afternoon where, well, I don't have to be on my A game for this guy. No, everyone requires the A game.
I'm pretty sure that listeners to our podcast are already the best of the best or want to be the best of the best. So this is good advice. Now, how do you, and I like how you put that, how in the private equity world, the level of talent and probably hustle is very high compared to a typical company. If other tech leaders want to get in the door with private equity companies, regardless of your warnings, the pro and the cons, how do you suggest they go about it?
Yeah, I think you really have to make sure that, and again, as I, half jokingly, but obviously, somewhat serious, would say that I had this big variety of background, and I think that's important. You're not going to. You may get into a specialized role in a private equity if you're a really good developer or you're a really good DBA. But if you want to get into a role like I was in, where you're a floater, you're moving around, you're working on different projects, I was doing technology diligence for incoming companies that we were investing in. I was also being sent out to work on projects that were going sideways or really focusing on the first year, removing barriers of growth in the technology space with brand new investments. You have to have a little bit of variety of capability in your background. So I would say continue to, round yourself out. Don't
Okay.
Go deep on some things that you really enjoy. Go deep on 3 or 4 things even. But, I would, I think you'd be better off having a master's in 3 things than a PhD in 1, if that makes sense.
No, that's good advice. All right. So, back to Moda Operandi, at a high level, tell us about some of the projects you're working on.
Yes. I mean, some of the stuff that we're doing right now is we're setting ourselves up for, like I was saying, this decision on platform and what do we do and how do we integrate, but still maintain our identity. And we're also doing some other exciting things. Like we just built our own fulfillment center there. We were using a 3PL, the one that I helped them move into. We just built and we're launching into our own fulfillment center. Now, that's a cost savings effort because, of course, 3PLs make 20% margin. So if you're paying multi-million dollars for a 3PL and you take 20% margin out, it's $1 million, right? So obviously those projects have payback. It's not the primary reason we do it. The primary reason we do it, along with saving the money, is, we are a very, high-end business. And if we want to do inserts or special wrapping, or we want to change the hangers we're using, or we want to pack differently, we're now in complete control of that. So, really, when you order something from Moda and you receive it, you get the package and you open it. It's carefully wrapped. I invite everyone to order from Moda Operandi, please, and receive something, and you'll see how it's packed. It's packed really well. And our partners at Ryder have been doing a good job of packing, obviously, along the way. But we would like to be in control of like how we pivot that and how we how we control it tighter. So that's been exciting. And we're also
So
working
if
on.
you have that 3PL side, so, and you're looking at modernization, does that include like ERP systems?
So we're a NetSuite shop right now on the ERP side. And one of the other things that's interesting that you say that, because the next area I was gonna mention was when we implemented NetSuite, we really implemented it as a general ledger. It was like the data caboose, we'll call it. All the data flowed into it, and it was the financial reporting system. But it wasn't really the source of when we didn't order from it and receive into it, and we didn't track inventory in it. We kind of did from an information standpoint for financial reasons, but we didn't treat it like an ERP. So one of the things we're doing right now is we're pulling it forward. We're pulling NetSuite in, and it's going to be a true ERP, cutting POs from it, receiving into it, paying out of it. We pay out of it now, but pay out of it directly, and cut out all these other extraneous information feeds that we've built around it, and actually leverage it as an ERP. So that's exciting because we're leveraging a system a solid foundational system that we can use as an ERP, and we'll spend less time, like I said, developing commodity things, and
Sure.
we'll be developing things that create more of an identity for us in the space.
So it sounds like you got a lot on your plate, a lot of strategic decisions to make. Prior to we started the show, we were having this great discussion you brought up of the 5-year tech rule as far as experience. Tell our listeners about that, if you would.
Of course, it's one of my many anecdotes. I believe, and I tell this to people that I want to try and coach or mentor, and I obviously tell this to my kids, like, when it comes to the technology space, my opinion is we all have about 5 years of experience. And the reason I say that is because if you go back 5 years, almost none of the technology that we were using for more than 5 years ago is really effectively in use today. I mean, it's recognizable, but it's not really the same things. It's similar to a conversation I heard the other day. Someone was saying, I can't remember who said it. I wish I could give them credit. They said, if you're making an AI decision today on implementation based on your knowledge of AI a year ago, you're having the wrong discussion. Right? Because you don't know enough about it. So AI is moving so fast, we're talking about a year. But for me, in general technology, let's look at 5. And my point is that beyond 5 years, what you have is experience. And if you're going to be a good technology leader, and if you're going to, whether you're at 5 years now or whether you're at 10 or 15, you have to remember that no one wants to hear you talk about your mainframe story from when you were working at,
You mean COBOL experience?
Yeah, no one wants to hear about your Fortran.
When the year 2000 hit, skills aren't still valuable?
No one wants to hear that story about, drinking the last cup of coffee on, before it turned the year 2000. But some of us were there. But the point is that it's the experience that you have. It's the pattern recognition and experience that you have that come from those additional years. And one of the biggest hallmarks for me between a good technology leader and a great technology leader is how much they panic when something goes wrong. Things break all the time. It's universal law that all moving parts eventually fail. So everything's going to fail eventually. What do you do when it does? How do you build so that it doesn't? That's where the experience comes in. It's in your
I am a big believer, Don, that our net worth and our value as executives and leaders is directly tied to our ability to solve more challenges than everyone else. I mean, period.
Great way to
I
put
think,
it.
when people, I want more money. I deserve this. Are you solving more challenges than everyone else? Can you handle more challenges than everyone else? That's my take.
Exactly.
Let's switch gears, Don. Talk to us about your engineering team, how you have things structured. Are you remote, hybrid, in person?
Oh, that's a great question. So about 50, when I got to Moda, we had about 50 people. I think we're down to 40 now. We've made some moves for efficiency, mostly releasing contractors and keeping our FTEs. We were a little imbalanced on contractors, in my opinion, when I got there. I like my engineering staff to be no more than 50% contract resources because of obvious reasons.
I mean, you want to keep the core knowledge in-house and have some flexibility. I think 50-50 is a solid ratio.
Yeah, you definitely shouldn't go beyond that. And so I got that. So we're down to about 40. Out of my team now, the way it's structured is I'm a big believer in program management and how program management can drive success, particularly with the business stakeholders and how they interact with the technology team. I have found that the number one thing I did when I was at Summit going into companies trying to, in the portfolio, just giving them general advice, and then as well as my own companies that I've worked in, something that I learned really well from a guy that I used to work for, Luke Frying. He's actually CTO of The Real.
That's a mouthful.
The Real. the real. It's they resell. He'd be a great person to have on your podcast too. He's a very smart guy. We learned, he actually taught me this kind of early, that visibility is key for the business to technology. And one of the things I've always set up is this idea of this, I call it tech pry. So we have a tech pry meeting every 2 weeks where we go through all the current active high priority projects with the business and with the stakeholders. And then of course they have breakout projects as required, but this is central to making sure the business understands that if tech has a lot of balls in the air, you have to talk about those with the business so they understand. Because, we all know the story, four blind men and an elephant, right? If you never get the people together, then, you four blind men and an elephant in a room. One guy feels the leg, it's a tree. One guy feels the tail, it's a rope. One guy feels the trunk, he thinks it's a snake, right? One guy feels the side, it's a wall. It's an old story. The point is that if you don't bring people together in the light, they don't really know what's going on completely. No one gets the full picture of the elephant. So we bring the people together every 2 weeks to give them that full picture, all the stakeholders, and that's run by my program team.
That's technical and non-technical stakeholders.
It is business stakeholders and the head of programs, the head of engineering, myself, and a few other key people. Okay. And that's an important thing for us. I think it's important for any group, particularly if your business feels not very aligned with technology. But that's why program management is important. So I have a vice president of program management that reports directly to me. And we have a program management vertical, and he has all of the product managers underneath him. So product management's a big deal. And then I have a engineering team. I have the 3 engineering teams, the front end, the kind of middleware, and the fulfillment center under a single director that reports that they could flow up to. And then I have a director of technical operations that handles DevOps and infrastructure and analytics and reporting. So, gotcha. And then separately from that, one thing I also think is important, this is kind of a piece of advice I'll give. I have the principal engineer reporting directly to me. So I have one principal engineer, the brightest among the engineers, pulled him out of that organization and put him directly reporting to me so that he can work across different groups as needed with authority, and he can also apply common best practices if necessary across groups.
That's unique, but I like that a lot.
It's helped me a lot. I think it's important, and it's and I would say, depending on your case, if you're from a peer development background, maybe that person is an infrastructure expert. And if you're like me from an infrastructure security background, that person tends to be more of a development hands-on. So really kind of a counsel, hand of the king, if you will.
Gotcha.
That's too far, but you know what I mean?
No, and let me go back to, so the biggest reason I often see CIOs, CTOs fail is when they don't have the non-technical business leaders on board with what's going on. And you conduct a cadence every 2 weeks where you're getting those parties together to, I don't want to say eliminate that risk, but eliminate anyone saying they didn't understand what tech is doing.
Right.
So that's very smart. And, sometimes when there's economic uncertainty and depending which way the tariff wind blows, CFOs say, all right, we got to cut. Although there's many great CFOs out there, usually CFOs and tech leaders aren't the best of friends.
I've never worked in an organization where, and I know there's a lot of organizations out there where the CIO or CTO will report to the CFO because it's tech is a huge cost center. My advice on that to any CEOs that are listening is don't do it. Tech is a big cost center, but if you treat it like a cost center, then that's what it will become. It will lose the point of innovation if you stifle it down to being just a generative cost center.
Very well said. And I don't think you could learn that in a book or read that somewhere. I think that's straight from real life bruises.
You got to see it fail. And then you're like, oh, that's why it failed.
Exactly. Great advice.
Yeah.
As a CIO in the world today, as we were talking about before the show, I think regardless of the industry, a lot of tech leaders are facing similar challenges out there. What are the biggest ones you see?
Yeah, I was saying earlier, one of the things I learned is I go to CISO conferences, CIO conferences, and I talk with peers and friends and just industry experts. You kind of realize that we all have the same problems. Varying degrees, different things are more important than others. But if you look across the myriad of problems, they're all very similar. And, right now, AI is a challenge for us because, I'll have a CEO, I'll have my CEO say, well, hey, why aren't we using AI for everything? And it's like, well, AI is a bit of the Wild West. We had to write an acceptable use policy for AI, for example, because everyone wanted to turn on everything that AI had to offer. And the problem with AI right now in that realm is that a lot of these, it's very much a fail forward approach right now that a lot of companies are taking with AI. And, let's try everything and see what works. Let's monetize what works and let's throw away what doesn't. Well, you get caught up in the maelstrom of the excitement phase of AI and you start installing browser plugins that give full read access to all of your email because company X designed it. And then company X gets bought by company Y and company Y gets acquired by your competitor. And now they have
And
access
in
to
the
all your email.
meanwhile, it's gobbling up all
Yeah.
this data and transferring ownership.
The most important thing about AI right now is data. Everyone says, well, make sure your data is clean and make sure your data is ready and get your, if your AI is going to be bad, if your data is not good. But the important thing to remember about that is that if they're that concerned about the cleanliness of data, then they're that concerned about the volume of data as well. And AI is just sucking up all of this data so it can use it. And the question is, what happens if that gets out of control? I mean, we've had cases recently where there have been exposure of what people have been searching for in AI fields. Like there's been documented cases where all of a sudden your last 50 searches get exposed, right?
And this is on both the private paid versions and the free ones.
Of course,
that this
yes.
is happening.
Yeah, and what are your protections there? And then also the other piece that people don't realize that we had to put into our AI policy to make sure is, right now, and I know this will get worked out. I trust that the industry will work it out. But for all intents and purposes, you can't utilize AI to generate things that you can copyright in a lot of cases. So if we take an image, right now our images are ours. We take all of the images, most of the images you see on Moda Operandi are pictures that we've taken in our studio. And we have a big studio and we're taking physical pictures and that's not AI generated. Those are models. We're doing all that. We do all that because it belongs to us once we do it. And we do it sometimes for other brands. And sometimes occasionally brands will give us their images as well. And then of course, those are on loan to us and we get to use them on the site. If we, at some point of passing things through AI, if you have a dress from a fashion designer and you say, well, it's white, but I want to show the one in red. So let's use AI to change it to red. It's a gray area. You still own the image. You just change the color. But then what if you say, well, let's just make the model, let's make the dress red, but she's standing in Paris and Milan Fashion Week is now, so let's put her in Milan instead, right? So now perhaps you do that. Now, arguably, you have no IP left. That image could be used by another site. You have no recourse now because you've passed it through too much. And these lines haven't been drawn. These lines of demarcation around the legality and the ability to copyright some of this is not established quite yet.
It's a huge issue out there.
So it's a huge issue because how far do you want to let your, you go on, you start using it to generate copyright for your site and images for your site. And is your site belong to you now? Or can anyone copy it and say, well, they generated that with ChatGPT. So it's fair game. So you have to be careful.
Now, Don, you mentioned that you have your company, your company-wide AI policy. What's your bet? Do you think a lot of companies out there have a formal AI policy around usage?
No, I don't. I think I recommend that to my peers. I was at a CISO conference a few months ago in Puerto Rico, and we were talking about that very thing. And probably half the companies there had actually done it. And most were talking about it, but it's time. It's time to put an AI policy in place for your company. So put an AI policy in place and say, look, here are the things that you can and can't do. And also at the bottom, have an appendix for approved AI tools. And, be generous with your approvals.
Just be ready to update that every other week.
Yes. And don't try to hold people back. Be generous with the approvals and let them use things, but have an opportunity to see, okay, what do you want to use? It's a browser plugin. Then you want to say, what company owns it? Where's the data going? And then make a quick determination. You can't make it too arduous for people to use it or they're going to circumvent. So we want to be good partners, but we have a duty to protect the company. We have a duty to protect the company's IP and we have a duty to protect the company's information from what right now is just a very excited maelstrom of AI where you don't know where your data is going sometimes.
I like that. And Don, I think that's great advice that it's time for every company to make sure to have their formal AI company policy. Don, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. Man, lots of great tidbits we covered here. This was a lot of fun.
This was fun.
Any final shout outs or advice for tech leaders you have?
Oh, gosh. I would just say, like I was saying before, just remember that it's the experience that you have that should keep you calm when things are going sideways. And I think that get in front of the AI problem and don't, it's easy to get pessimistic about AI and get discouraged and kind of just, let's see how everything works out and then we'll get to it later. But I don't think we can wait on this one. You have to get in front of it, have that conversation with your CEO and write your policy and be part of that revolution. We're not going to win that one. So you're not going to keep it out of your company. So you got to get on board with it. And then it's, I guess the only other piece of advice I would have, which is kind of tangential to this because we've touched on it a few times, but we haven't spoken about it directly, is I've been able to do some of this because I have a very strong relationship with the legal counsel in my company. And as a CIO and as particularly as a CISO, form a tight allegiance with your head of legal and make sure that he or she feels that you're on the same team and work together with them, because we've done wonderful things working with our legal counsel to protect the company.
It's dumb to fight it. It's better to team up with all the leads, whether it's finance or legal. So definitely great advice. Don, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Stay bold and keep building.